On June 28, 2004, workers at the Wright City rest area in the state of Missouri discovered an unidentified torso lying close to some bushes. The victim was so brutally mutilated that the torso couldn't be recognized. Detectives had a very difficult time identifying it because it lacked a head, arms, or legs. How the police eventually determined the identity of the torso and what happened to the victim would be discussed in this cold case that took 18 years of non-stop work to crack. Today, this case takes us to Wright City, Missouri. Wright City, Missouri is a small city that is frequently disregarded for those seeking an outdoor adventure. There are many outdoor activities in the area, so there is something for everyone. Wright City has everything you're looking for, whether you want a heart-pounding adventure or just to relax and take in nature. The city has trails for biking and hiking, swimming holes, fishing holes, and more. In Wright City, there are countless opportunities for outdoor recreation, from biking through forested trails to boating on Lake Calhoun. Due to its historical structures and its expansive landscapes, Wright City is the ideal location for those seeking a genuine small-town experience. The low crime rate is one of the main advantages of living in a place like Wright City. Residents feel safer at night knowing they are surrounded by a close-knit community. However, this appeared not to be the case in 2004, when a horrifying discovery shook the small town. On June 28, 2004, the small town of Wright City woke up to a slow morning. There wasn't much activity in town. Just like any other day, some employees were getting ready to clean up the picnic area close to the Wright City rest stop on Interstate 70. While others were picking up trash, others were watering the plants. A group of workers was in charge of trimming the bushes and shrubs that surrounded the picnic area so that people wouldn't have any trouble sitting there. They had no idea that this cleaning would produce something so horrifying that even the police would take 18 years to deal with it. While they trimmed the bushes, some of the cleaning workers discovered a strange object inside the picnic area's deep end. When they approached to investigate what the strange object was, the workers found a carcass. They initially believed it to be a mannequin, but they were mistaken. It was a woman's torso. There was no complete body. The workers could only make out a torso without a face, hands, or even legs. They immediately called the police to the scene because they were aware that everything about this was wrong. When the police arrived, they observed that the torso wore a black bra and had 2 surgical incisions close to her abdomen. The police were immediately of the opinion that the marks were most likely caused by an appendectomy or cesarean procedure. In order to get additional clues, the police began sporadically searching the area as they spread out. While they looked for clues, some police officers discovered a knife with foreign DNA on it in a nearby sewer. Additionally, the police discovered DNA on the torso that wasn't the victim's. Even though the police thought that this foreign DNA was probably that of the murderer, the only issue was that there was no way to identify the victim. The police thoroughly searched the entire city for other pieces of the victim's dismembered body, but were unsuccessful. It appeared as though each body part had been severed and dumped in several locations far away from Wright City. The police were initially baffled since they couldn't physically identify the body. The body was just a torso and a black bra. It lacked a face, hands, or legs. The unidentified torso's DNA could be used to match it with a family member. But again, when the body is unidentified, there are no named family members. The police didn't even know if the torso belonged to someone who lived in Wright City, making it impossible for them to visit every home in the community and request DNA samples. This case's difficulty was startling. Imagine being tasked with identifying a body that lacks any relatives, a home, hands, legs, or even a face. The only thing that could have kept the investigation going was if someone had approached the police and revealed that they knew the person whose body had been discovered close to the picnic area. This, however, was exactly what happened in 2016, when local police officer Brian Barker was apprehended and charged with crimes he had committed. When Brian Barker was in police custody, he admitted to the officials that he had reported his sister missing in 2006, but it had never been investigated. According to him, the torso discovered in Wright City's picnic area might belong to his sister. Brian may have done this out of genuine love for his sister, or simply out of a desire to assist the police so that he could be absolved of some of the crimes he had previously committed. In the year 2006, Brian Barker went to the police station and told them to file a report because his sister had been missing for 2 years. The police did so at the time, but since Brian had no idea where his sister might be and the police had no way to find her, Brian's case was abandoned after that. The story of Brian Barker, however, did not end there. Policeman Brian Barker had a bad reputation. He had broken many laws while performing his duties and would do so for years to come. The Edwardsville Police Department received numerous reports of business-related burglaries between 2009 and 2014. These complaints totaled almost 24 per year on average. To cut a long story short, these complaints were reduced to almost 6 annually after Brian Barker's arrest. It was because Brian was not only a dishonest police officer, but also a thug. His ruse was to intimidate individuals while committing fraud or theft by flashing his police badge. He was alleged to have burglarized homes in the area, stolen firearms, and stolen property. For his crimes, the 43-year-old Brian Barker received a 40-year sentence from the court. Therefore, helping the police with the unidentified torso case may have worked in Barker's favor so that he could attempt to have his sentence reduced. Without much leads to identify the discovered torso, the case went cold for 10 years. Later in 2014, the case was reopened by Warren County Sheriff Lieutenant Matt Schmutz, and in 2016, investigators decided to indulge Brian Barker. They attempted to match his DNA sample with the torso. Although Brian insisted that the torso belonged to his sister, the police began to believe that he was lying to obtain a reduced sentence because the samples did not match. Due to Brian's insistence, the police tried his DNA again, but this time they also collected DNA from other family members. Once more, a fresh sample of DNA was taken from the torso and sent for analysis. Sampling for DNA is a very challenging process. It is possible that a father and daughter's DNA do not match, but that of the father and the niece's did. This is what had previously happened to Brian's DNA. His DNA samples had not previously matched the torsos, but after additional family members contributed their samples, the match was made. Ashley Kinnear, the daughter of Brian's sister, provided the most significant matches among the family members' DNA samples, which were obtained after numerous attempts to match them. Brian Barker was not lying after all, because the initial unidentified torso was his sister. Finally, the police made a breakthrough in the case, and they discovered that the unidentified torso belonged to Deanna Denise Howland. After this discovery, a more serious issue emerged. Deanna had no known home address and no single surname. Since she had 5 children with various fathers and had been married multiple times, she had used a variety of surnames. Deanna Denise Howland was raised partially in both Collinsville and Edwardsville. Her father was a union organizer as well as a banker. Although she did not have a poor upbringing, life became much more tough for her as she grew older. She also fell victim to the horrifying trap of drug addiction. As time passes, Deanna gradually developed into one of those family members who leaves the house too frequently and many a times never returns home. She couldn't support herself because she was an addict, and with the expansion of police departments across America, buying and selling drugs also became expensive. It was as if Deanna was destined to experience poverty. She never stayed with her family because she was aware that she would never be able to provide for them. Supporting herself was more crucial for Deanna, but even that was getting harder as a result of her addiction problems. To be able to fend for herself, poor Deanna chose the riskiest course of action. She decided to turn to prostitution. She thought that her only chance of surviving was through prostitution. Throughout her adult life while she does drugs, Deanna got involved with many men who would find her jobs so that she could make more money. Due to her lifestyle and job, which were both well known, Deanna frequently encountered law enforcement. She spent a lot of time in jail as well. According to her daughter Ashley Kinnear, Deanna's visits to jail were so frequent that it almost became second nature for her to make it out alive. Regardless of her lifestyle, Deanna loved her children dearly. She would make time for her kids and meet them as soon as she was released from prison. After sharing a meal together with them, she would go out to continue her risky hustle. Ashley loved Deanna dearly, despite spending most of her life away from her mother, and she could tell that Deanna felt the same way about her, despite the fact that she was rarely present. She claimed that Deanna called her every year and never forgot her birthday. Deanna had promised Ashley before she vanished that she would attend a play in which Ashley was acting, but the day after, Deanna failed to show up, and Ashley realized something was wrong. In addition to her maiden name, Deanna Barker, Deanna Dennis Howland also went by the names Deanna Kinnear and Deanna Frolick. According to court's records, Deanna was born in Belleville, Illinois, married in 1991, and had at least 2 children before divorcing her husband 4 years later. Her family either refused to comment or could not be reached. Deanna lived a nomadic lifestyle and was estranged from her family. Before her disappearance in May 2004, she was last spotted in the areas of Alton, Granite City, and East St. Louis. The Missouri State Police are accustomed to researching a missing person's family history. A decade-old case of T.J. Emily's disappearance was recently resolved, thanks to a genetic genealogy program. T.J. Emily went for a walk on the evening of March 25, 1990, but he never came back home. In the same year, a missing persons case was opened, but nothing was discovered. Similar to what happened to Deanna, a skeleton was discovered in an old abandoned building 2 years later, on March 7, 1992. The police attempted to identify the skeleton's DNA, but were unsuccessful. When the case was reopened years later, the police worked with an NGO named the DNA Doe Project. They soon identified the skeleton as belonging to T.J. Emily through an exhaustive investigation that took 20 long years. In 2019, genetic genealogy was used to solve yet another terrible case. Angie Hausman, then 9 years old, left her home in 1993 and never came back. Her body was found near St. Louis, in a conservation area. She had been abandoned there by her kidnapper 9 days after she had vanished, and she eventually died of asphyxiation because her mouth had been duct-taped. Angie's trimmed underwear was used to collect a DNA sample, which was then sent to a lab. The police discovered that Earl Webster Cox, a retired Navy officer, was Angie's murderer years later, after using genetic genealogy. Returning to Deanna's case, the same thing transpired here, when it was discovered that the unidentified torso belonged to Deanna Dennis Howland. The police began testing the DNA of the murderer that had been discovered on the torso and on the knife that had been left at the scene of the crime. Deanna's lower torso was sampled for DNA, and some was also found on the knife that the police had discovered in the sewer. In 2019, the police collected a DNA sample from the knife. After obtaining the DNA, the police sent the samples to the lab to be examined by scientists working on the genetic genealogy program. The police were able to gradually focus their search after conducting tests continuously for almost 3 years, and thanks to ongoing developments in genetic genealogy, they eventually located the suspect, Mike A. Clardy. Mike A. Clardy was found by the police while residing in Maryland Heights with his wife. In addition, Mike A. Clardy was blind. But was he blind when Deanna was brutally murdered? No. After Deanna was killed in a completely unrelated incident, Mike lost his vision. After his arrest, Mike admitted to killing Deanna on the evening of June 28, 2004. It's critical to know that prior to Deanna's murder, Mike wasn't a criminal or a serial killer. He had never been detained by the police for anything, let alone murder. Why then did he kill Deanna? According to Mike's version of the events that transpired, Deanna, who was a prostitute at the time, frequented Mike's home, which was located at the 3500 block of Dixie Drive in St. Anne. Mike often brought male clients for her. However, in the evening of June 26, 2004, on one of Deanna's visits, a fight broke out between Mike and Deanna. The argument went beyond all reasonable limits, and Mike's rage made him lose his mind. In the end, Mike killed Deanna and cut her body into pieces. Other parts were scattered throughout St. Louis County and Warren County, while the torso was thrown at the Wright City rest area. The police tried to find Deanna's other body parts, but were never able to. Mike's arrest and confession shocked his neighbors and family. It was impossible for Mike's neighbors to see him in this context. They had no idea the 63-year-old blind man would be responsible for such heinous crime. Mike is most likely to serve a life sentence, and a judge has set him on a $1 million bail. It's a sad story for Deanna's family for sure. It is even sadder that as soon as she vanished, the majority of her family stopped thinking about her, not knowing what cruel predicament had befallen her. Despite the stigma that society always associates with drug users and prostitutes, Ashley Kinnear, her daughter, will always remember her mother, Deanna, and how much she loved her. When the police finally apprehended Deanna's killer, Ashley was overcome with emotion. Ashley, of all people at least, finally found closure after almost 2 decades. Thanks to the tenacious efforts of law enforcement and forensic specialists who never gave up on this case, justice had finally been carried out. Although it cannot restore Deanna's life or her love for her children, it serves as a warning to all murderers that they cannot remain hidden forever and will always be held accountable for their evil deeds. What do you think about this case? Comment below with your thoughts, and remember to like, share and subscribe to our channel for more engrossing true crime tales. Up until next time, stay woke and watch out for the next mystery to come to light.